the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, episode 20. When it comes to task management, you know that one size doesn't fit all. You already know that. And you're someone who has increased your workflow over the years. You have more tasks than ever and a future of more task management, not less. At the moment, your current approach works, but you suspect that it may run into problems as you add a new project, add a new child to your family, pick up a new hobby, one of your parents gets ill or needs some extra support, you take on a new sport, decide to do a marathon, you want to travel the world, you get a promotion, you decide to go back and get a master's degree, and so on and so forth. How do you adjust your approach when you realize that you need to change your methods because and as your task volume increases, and you can only see a future of more tasks? Knowing that this is a problem just isn't enough. You want more. Tune into this episode to hear from me and my special guest, Dr. Frank Buck, as we solve this challenging problem together. Welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. So welcome back. So as you see, we have a special guest for this episode, Dr. Frank Buck. And before I introduce Frank, let me welcome you in case this is the first time you're actually listening to one of the podcasts here at the Time Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. And we follow a slightly different format, actually a very different format from most podcasts. What do? Well, we spend the first part of the episode pulling apart the problem. So we spend a great deal of time on diagnosis. Our belief is that if you understand the problem, you'll actually be better equipped to solve it. So that's the first part. In the second part, we go into solutions, which is all about putting our heads together, trying to come up with something maybe that neither of us have even thought of before. So we'll bring all of our prior thoughts and our thinking. And we're also looking for that golden moment where 1 and 1 equals 3. And if that happens, you'll hear a bell in the background. And that'll signify that we've come across something brand new and we've innovated something fresh for this podcast. If, however, we get to the end and there's nothing there that's new, I'll also put in a buzzer just to keep things fair. So we have a bell and a buzzer, like this is a boxing ring, right? Okay.
Okay.
All right, so just before I introduce Frank, let me just tell you a story. And the story is about a fellow named Peter. Peter works as a well-known task management app developer, well, just like the ones you probably heard of, like a Trello or a Todoist. He did well during his first 2 years on the job, but a promotion to senior project manager has been difficult. Why? Well, Peter leads up 3 teams, totaling 15 people in all. And the complex projects they're working on translate to hundreds of tasks. So as a result, he's got to make sure that they're all done in order to move each of these projects forward. He uses the app the company sells to the public, but he starts to think that it's not well suited for his new job. All of a sudden, unexpected errors are reappearing. The kind of things he had thought he had gotten over a long time ago, like his inbox, which now has 345 unread messages in 2 weeks. So he went from 0 inbox to 345 in the inbox in just 2 weeks, just about the time he got promoted. Now, he can't just stop using the company's app because that would be like blasphemy. In fact, he also gets a commission every time one of his trainees or a prospect or a customer starts using the app for the first time. So he's got to be a role model. You can't sell what you don't use.
That's
You got
right.
to eat your own dog food. Or else it could reduce his sales and the word will get out. And next thing people are saying on Twitter that the people at the app company aren't even using their own app. They're off doing other things. What should he do? Well, that's why we brought up Dr. Frank Buck to be with us in our episode to delve into this and all other problems related to the one that Peter has. By way of introduction, Frank Buck is ranked #1 in the world by Global Guru's Top 30 in time management. He's a speaker, productivity coach, and author of Get Organized and Get Organized Digitally. He helps busy professionals achieve total control over their time and the peace of mind that nothing is falling through the cracks. Frank Buck, welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast.
Francis, great to be here. We have worked on so many projects together over the last several years, and I'm delighted to be here. And maybe we can solve Peter's problem.
I'm hoping that we can put our heads together and come up with something that the world has never seen before. And we shall see. Sometimes it happens. But to be honest, so far it's happened on each episode. No pressure, but we've not had the buzzer come into play on any prior episode yet. So the problem is that Peter is going through a transition, and he's clinging to the prior way of doing things. And this is not unusual, is it?
Right. So what worked before is not working now.
Right. And he's suspicious, but he's not exactly sure, because when this happens for the first time, it certainly happened with me. You double guess yourself and triple guess, and you second guess, second, third, fourth. You think that you're not doing it right, because if he's like anybody else, he'd go back to the manual, the how to use the app book or program, and he'd think he's doing something wrong, right? Because his first thought is that I'm wrong, and I'm not doing something right. Correct?
To me, that's the thought I would have. I would go first to, is there something I can do better? Because he's got a dilemma. He's selling this app. He works for this company that's making its livelihood off of this app. You can't very well say, well, gosh, this app doesn't work. We actually do something. And as you said so beautifully, Francis, you must eat your own dog food. So the first thought I would have is there something I'm doing wrong? And yes, if there's an owner's manual, go back and see, is there some way we can use this software better?
And you probably talk to some people who would reaffirm that. There's a lot of people who've used an app or an approach like GTD who ask other people, why is it not working? And their advice is to double down, right?
Yeah. And so, he can ask the people who are there in the company using the app. I think he also needs to ask people outside the company who maybe have used the app, left the app, use a different app, are familiar with a lot of apps. Because I think we see a lot of commonalities, and even though maybe I don't use the piece of software that Peter does, I know the kinds of things that I'm expecting it to do. For example, I'm expecting to be able to assign a date to a task, assign a repeating pattern to that task, to be able to forward emails to that task app. So there may be a little something that Peter's missing within that piece of software that someone else who doesn't even know that software says, now, in your software, can you do X? Can you forward an email into it? And Peter goes, what? You can do that kind of thing? So he didn't even know the capability was there. That would help him with the overflowing hundreds and hundreds of emails in the inbox, many of which are in the inbox because they're reminders of things that Peter has to do.
Right. And Peter's a good salesperson, right? He believes he's evangelical about his software. So
absolutely, yes.
He doesn't go talking to the enemy. He doesn't go to the church of Satan.
Right. Yeah.
Because he makes his living from selling the app in part, and he convinces people that this is the best thing. And when they come to him and say, yeah, but what about this other feature? He says, no, you don't want to use that. And part of that is because he sincerely believes like many people who believe in GTD or
Mhm.
Trello or Pomodoro or anything, he sincerely believes that it's the real thing and the right thing to do. And he has a financial incentive to keep pushing it. So he, flirting with the enemy and finding out what other people are doing is difficult for him.
Mhm.
No? And it is for most people, once you've settled on an app and if you become sort of a real believer or you settle on an approach and you start to evangelize it to other people, you don't give it up lightly.
It's
However,
hard to do. Yeah. Yeah. And I've been there. I've been there myself,
mm,
when
so
when a
bye.
piece of when a piece of software goes belly up, or when the management at a at a piece of software, when the president sells the company to someone else who immediately starts dismantling things. I've been through it. And jumped ship, went to something else, told followers, look, I no longer use this piece of software because for the following reasons. Here's where I went. Here's why I went there. Here's what I'm recommending to you. And here's a good on ramp. I put together an ebook that'll help you get there quickly. Of course, if I'm selling that first piece of software, I can't exactly do that unless I've now gone to work for the other guys. If I'm stuck working at that company, I'm selling that piece of software. It's one of those things where I've got to make it work. Now, I think one of the ways to make it work is to get familiar with the competitors. Yeah, I mean, you always want to be cognizant of what your competitors are doing so that you know where you're better than they are and you can shout it from the mountaintops, and know where you're not nearly as good as they are so that you can hopefully avoid that part of the conversation. But in doing so, you you peel back that onion of what are the good things about the competitor's software. And one thing you may find is that your piece of software has that and you just didn't know it. In that movie about Dorothy and she wants to get to
Right.
Kansas,
Right.
how long did she spend before she figured out that the ruby slipper she had on her feet the whole time gave her the easy answer? She was trying something much more difficult. So number one, we can find that, there's something our software will actually do that we just didn't know until we ask the right question of the right person. And then secondly, if it really won't do what it needs to do, when you're inside the company, you are in the perfect position to ask the right questions of the right people and make some improvements in the software. If you get to the right pair of ears and eyes.
But I would have to come away down the pike because he'd have to have that. Let's call it the early inkling, the first inkling.
Mhm.
And for me, it happened when I was leading programs for a company in about 2001. My mom did the program, and I talked to her maybe like 6 months later,
Yeah.
and I said, "Well, how's it working?" And she said, "Oh, I'm not using any of that stuff." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, it's not really for me. I'm retired. I don't need that kind of thing." And I thought this is kind of like, you know, I didn't have kids, so this was my firstborn.
Yeah.
And she was like denying my child and saying that, it was no good. I took it personally. So I tried to correct her ways like an idiot. But it dawned on me somewhere around there that one size didn't fit all because I couldn't negate her experience.
Mhm.
And if this worked, at first thing I thought was maybe it works for busy people who are still in the job. But then I started to talk to other people who done the program, and it started to dawn on me that one size doesn't fit all. So
Mhm.
for Peter to get to the point where he goes back into the company and starts to ask for more features, it would have to dawn on him that maybe all of us don't use the same thing the same way for the same end result. And that for some
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
us, after we've drunk the Kool-Aid and after we've come to believe in whatever we're doing, is a bit of a hard way to go. And there are folks listening to this who are in their mind, they're saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're
Mm,
wrong. And we're kind of shedding a light that maybe one size doesn't fit all, and maybe what you think to be correct and true and right may not be.
mhm.
And maybe if you shed some
Absolutely.
light in, maybe go check out, just like you said, check out the other apps that are out there. Open your mind just a little bit to what people are doing. They are good people. Get your mom involved because you can't say that she's a bad person and she doesn't know what she's doing. You can only go so far when it's your mom, right? And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
start to talk to the people who are in the company, the designers, not just the fan base, and
Mhm.
ask them, how come this doesn't have this particular feature? And start to query and start to open your mind up. It's like, for me, it was an epiphany. And I think for many people, it might be just this, it's like a little crack that opens up. And
Right.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the light starts coming in, and it's like, oh. But that explains why this is not an easy transition for some to make,
Mhm.
because there are many who believe that one size should fit all,
Right.
and that you have to
You
use,
mhm.
and you really shouldn't. What I'm doing is the right way, and you should follow what I'm doing.
Mhm. And sometimes, the feature is not in that particular piece of software, but there is a workaround.
Right.
If you know the end, you know where you're trying to get, you know what you want the software to do, maybe that particular feature is not built in, but there's another way to skin the cat, as we say here in the South, that there
Right.
is a workaround. That's one thought that comes to mind.
Right.
Um, and another thought that comes to mind as we're having this conversation about Peter, who evidently has some real strengths, and he's moving through the company, and he's been successful with the software and his workflow, but now the responsibilities have changed. And what worked in the past, he doesn't foresee working in the future. And I think any of us out there, as we move through our careers, we're moving from um, handling tasks others are giving to us, where we show up to work and our to do list has been prepared by somebody else, to we show up at work and we're doing the work that we are able to define. And then at some point in our career, we're doing the work with other people, that the project is one that's so large that it's not something I produce on my own. And here's the end result. I've got to be in collaboration with other people all day long. And we've all got to know who's got what part of the puzzle, where are each of us. And then at some point in our career, we're getting work done through other people, where our job is maybe to do the smoozing with other higher ups and solicit the funding, get the grants, that sort of thing. Be the face of the company, and the day to day operations are being handled by somebody else. But we can't just have the confidence, well, all that's being handled. Um, how do we stay on top of who's got what, who's doing what they're supposed to, where are the balls being dropped? So, totally different requirements of our system.
Right. That's a
And
that's a
so
nice
how
three-step model. Did you have that one coming into the show before, or did you just invent that one on the fly, Frank?
well, it
It's a good one.
it in a way invented it on the fly. But I mean, if I look back at my own career, I
Yeah.
was a junior high band director. Well, and the very first day, here's the red book, as everybody on the faculty knew. It was the notebook that had every question you needed answered was in the red book. Very well, very
Faculty
put
Red Book.
together principle.
Uh,
But then, as far as really running the band program itself, I had to do the inventing there. It wasn't like the teacher down the hall from me knew how to do band. No, he knew how to teach art, and he did it successfully. And she knew how to teach speech and drama. But the to-do list, as far as getting that spring concert going and it being successful, that was me. And then now I'm a principal, and
right.
now I'm getting work done through other people. So how can we make sure that teachers have what they need, and that they're doing what they need to do and they're collaborating like they need to collaborate. And the things that make you successful at one point may not make you successful somewhere else. I have seen people who weren't very good teachers who were
Great
successful principals
principle.
because they knew how to motivate other people, get them to work together, that sort of
Right.
thing. It's the exception rather than the rule. I've also seen people who were phenomenal teachers. They
Fail.
could get, close the door, let me have my 20 kids and I can do wonders. But then when they were in charge of the whole building, it was like,
Right.
I,
Right.
I
So
have
I'm
no
gonna
idea. Yeah.
put a ding. If my beep was working, I'd beep no, because that three level invention that you just
Yeah.
did is exactly why we're here, to come up with brand new stuff like that. It's a great example. And
Hmm.
in the case of Peter, so Peter, and I think almost everyone who goes through that maturity, the three levels of the Frank Buck maturity model, what
I
happened?
could sell that now. See,
The,
I
the
came
name
up
on
with
it,
it. We can sell it.
I gave the FBMM.
Yeah.
For the people who go through that, which is most people who have a successful career, the more successful, the more you transition from a low volume of tasks, which somebody else gives you,
Hmm.
to a very, very high volume of tasks, which, following the FBMM, you are giving yourself for the most part. Because
Yes.
when you're a principal, you don't have a chairman who is on you every day telling you what to do and micromanage. Or if you do,
Right.
it will kill you, it will cripple you.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it can't work that way. Instead, you're the one assigning yourself tasks. And as you become more adept at it, as you go from teacher to administrator to principal, by the end of it, you're lying in bed at 10 o'clock at night. Your mind is creating more tasks because that's what you do.
Hmm.
You're assigning yourself more and more to do. And
Yeah.
the problem that Peter has is he doesn't know. Even if he realizes that one size doesn't fit all, he may not know that task volume is an important determinant of the system you need to create. And the task volume he had as an entry level salesperson or trainer is very different than he had as the project manager of 3 teams and 15 people working for him. So he may
Hmm.
not catch that as the volume of tasks increases, the app that the company sells is perfect for down here, but not so good for up here.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
that's
Hmm.
the core problem that we have. We're talking about today is that people who know that one size doesn't fit all, and I've seen all kinds of explanations. I've seen personality explanations that say, oh, if you're this kind of personality, use this kind of task management tool or approach. Or if you're in this profession, oh, use this. Uh, but the core idea that task volume, and if you've not heard this idea before, let me just do a quick explanation. It's like, imagine, Frank, if you invited me over to help you move some dirt around. And I said, oh, great, sure. I'll if I lived in Alabama, of course, I'd have to do that.
Hmm.
I'd say, sure, Frank, I'll come over and help you move that dirt around. And the night before I'm supposed to head over to Frank, I go into my garage and I pull out my trowel, my hand shovel. And I show up the next day at Frank's and he says, where are you going with that? And I said, we're going to move some dirt around, right? You're going to pot some plants, right?
Not much
He
dirt.
says,
We're not. Yeah.
no, he said, I wanted you to go pick up the front end loader from U-Haul.
Right.
Bring that with you. I'd pay you back, but that's what I wanted. Didn't you get that part of the message? And I was like, a front end, what are you trying to do? And he take me to the back of the property, and I look at this hole that you built because you want to build a 20-foot pit using the front end
Hmm.
loader. And I'm holding my trowel in my hand, and I'm looking at the space that you've mapped out, and I'm thinking, oh, it's still about moving dirt, but it's a way more dirt than I imagined. And the tool that I
Hmm.
have in my hand is useless in
Yeah.
helping you to move that volume of dirt.
Right.
And that's the
And
same thing that happens in real life
and of course, see, the
with
tool
tasks.
that you had would have been great if it had been, we're going to fill a few flower pots.
Would
And
have
in
been
fact, the
perfect.
front end loader would not have worked at all. You
That
know,
would have been a disaster.
it would have been an absolute disaster. So, the right tool for the right job. And
Exactly.
I think also using the tool for the see, another thing that I see so much is people, when something doesn't work, the first thing they want to do is get another piece of software, adopt a new system.
They do.
And I did a lot of that. If you looked at my very first formal time management, productivity, organization system, it was as a senior in high school. So we're talking 1976. And mine was an index card for the day. It was in my pocket. On the front of the index card, there were my marching orders for the day, any appointment I had, any particular thing I needed to do, and then anything that came up during the day, homework assignments, pretty girl gives me her phone number, whatever came up during the day went on the back of the card, the back of the card. So now when I get home, I've got exactly one job: handle the card, do what I can do, and what needs to be done at some time in the future, start a card for that day. So now that would not work for me today. The volume of stuff wouldn't work for me today. But you know what does work? The idea of, on the front of the card, predetermined, here's what I had told myself at some time in the past I wanted to be doing that day. That lives on right now, and it's on an expensive phone that's synced
Right.
to an expensive computer. It's bouncing off satellites, all that good kind
Right.
of stuff. And then whatever does come up during the day, instead of going on the back of an index card, I'm throwing it as a task in Remember the Milk, usually with my voice. And then there's the little Remember the Milk inbox.
Right.
Frank, here's everything that you threw at me today. It's the back of the index card from 1976. So I think a lot of this is looking at those principles with a
Right.
PLE that
Right.
are timeless.
Right.
And instead of junking the system, and actually the thing that took me back to that was to say that, yeah, so 1976 to now, a lot of water's gone across the dam.
A little
And
bit.
as things started not to work, my inclination was, I need a new system. This system's not working. I need a new system. And so the new system would always work until it didn't. Then I
Right.
would do a new system, and that would work beautifully
Until it
until it
didn't.
didn't. And so what I finally was smart enough to figure out after several decades was, during the process of changing my system, I was cleaning it up. And so I was starting with something that was clean. No wonder it worked. So now every time I get the idea that, oh, I need a new system, the smart part of my brain tells the dumb part, no, you don't need a new system. You need to clean up the one you have. You don't need a new house because it's all cluttered. You need to clear up the clutter in your house. You need some garbage bags, and you need to sit down and you need to make some decisions. And so many people don't make those decisions. They just go, oh, well, let me get that piece of software. I
Right.
just saw a YouTube video and it worked great on the YouTube video. It worked great on the YouTube video for the guy who only had 5 things on his to-do list.
Yeah. If you notice that software apps in their advertisements, they never have more than like 10
Yeah,
items.
yeah,
They
yeah.
always have a really small number, which it helps for the selling point, but it doesn't help you to make the transition, because someone who did what you did and jumped from one to the other
Mhm.
may think that there's something very wrong with their jumping from one to the other. They may not see that there's this invisible task volume that's increasing in the background. And what
Yes.
they're doing is they're scaling up. No, they may not follow the smoothest process to scale up, but they might think that something is wrong, and they might unwittingly or mistakenly, I did this. I went from time blocking. I used to keep lists. I learned about time blocking, started doing it, ran into some difficulty, went back to listing, keeping lists, stopped time blocking and stopped using my calendar because I didn't know what else to try. I
Mhm.
had no map of the universe to say, oh, it goes in a particular order. And I went back to keeping lists, got rid of the time blocking. Things got 10 times worse. I said, no, no, that doesn't make any sense. What was I doing? So I had to go back now to time blocking. So I made this zigzag progression. It wasn't a progression. It was back and forth. Because
Mhm.
if we stick to the one, we stick to the one level, or we bounce between levels, then we don't quite understand why we need to change. We see an ad, we see somebody makes a recommendation to us, we change, and then it doesn't work, and we don't know why it changes. So we're left floundering because we don't really have a philosophy. We don't
Right.
understand the
Yeah.
principles behind. We can't. I guess you could be like someone who tries something for the first time and you get some luck, but
Mhm.
then it gets measurably more difficult, and you don't know why because you never really understood the principles to begin with. You basically lucked out on some practices. And that leads you to
Yeah.
try all kinds of things and to get into this kind of state that Peter finds himself in, where it's like, what do I do? Do I stick to what I have? Do I change what I have? But really, what I think we're saying is that without the understanding behind it of the principles, like the principle that you shared
Mhm.
of capturing and planning a day, capturing your
Yes.
tasks
Yep.
and planning a day, the principle never changed, but the method of applying it needed to change. And now you can look back and you can understand, oh, okay, I was doing my best without understanding the principles behind it. But now I can see the principles at play and I can help other people to do it. But when you don't know these principles and you find yourself floundering, you either cling to what you think you know or you bounce around randomly, and it's a tough spot to be in, isn't it?
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like Lucy and Ethel in the candy factory, you know? And I think everybody, yeah, have you seen that? I'm sure you've seen
Is
that
that
episode.
Charlie the Chocolate Factory?
No, no, Lucy and Ethel from I Love Lucy.
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
yeah,
With the
yes,
with
the
the
university.
conveyor
It
belt.
it it
Yes,
doesn't matter someone's age or where they grew up on planet Earth. Everybody knows that episode of I Love Lucy where and it looks easy at first. There are only a few pieces of candy, and the conveyor belt is moving very slowly. Now, if they had any idea what was about to happen, they would probably have spent some time fashioning some kind of little machine that would help them wrap chocolate quicker, box chocolate quicker, that
right.
sort of thing, instead of just trying to work faster using tools that weren't working for them.
Appropriate for
They
the
were
task.
working a whole lot more than they really needed to be working,
Right.
and
What a
and
great
weren't getting
example.
the results. Just
Great visual
what was it?
example.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But it actually mirrors what we try to do because we try to move faster. We try to pedal faster in the
Mhm,
water. We don't see the progress and we
mhm.
don't know why. We
We
don't
make
understand it.
mistakes.
We make mistakes
We
and
make
we think
mhm,
we try doubling down.
mhm,
We try to ask people for help. But the truth is that the people like you or I, experts, we don't talk about task volume. It's not studied. And as someone who I spend a whole lot of time in academic journals
mhm,
looking for research that kind of points to what we're talking about. And in the area of task management, I've not found it. I
mhm.
could find parallel studies in industrial engineering, which happens to be my background, but they have to do with factories. They have to do with
Mm.
physical objects, not psychological objects. And the
Yeah.
two of them don't behave the same. So the research isn't there. And people like you or I, experts in task management who study this thing for a living, productivity experts, we're not really clear about the relationship I can tell it, like I say this from talking to other productivity experts. We don't have a really clear message about it. We just kind of say that this will work better for you, but we don't say under what conditions or why. So that's
Mhm.
part of the job that we're not bringing this kind of understanding to the general audience so that people can know what worked for me in high school just won't work for me as an adult. And the reason is just, it's Lucy and Ethel all over again. And
Right. Yeah.
I need to back up a step and say, okay, if they're going to increase the number of chocolates coming down, I need to change my approach. And
Mhm.
need to step back and think. But we're not doing a part of. I'll criticize folks like us, and say, when we're coaching or training or writing books, it's easier to sell one size fits all stuff, isn't it?
It is. And to portray it um as if you don't have much to do, you know.
Yeah,
Here's your to-do list for tomorrow with my software, and there's only
10
three
items,
things on it.
3 things.
And then you even get the people that say, I'll just only pick three things to do during the day. Do those three, and then keep that big long list somewhere else and just pick three things to do and leave the 300 things over there on the list. And that works great the first day. You do those three things, and the world didn't come crashing down, and you feel great. And so the next day you pick three things, only now the list over there is not 300, it's 350. And
Right.
then after doing this for a week and you've been doing three things each day, and your list over there is now 972, and there are no clean dishes because they're all in the sink. And the grass is now a foot tall because you hadn't mowed it because that wasn't one of the top three. And then suddenly the electricity's cut off because you didn't pay the bill because that
And your
hadn't risen to one of the top three.
and your inbox is exploding, and
Yeah. And
you were
people say,
okay
well,
a few weeks
you know,
ago, and no,
delegate those things. Well, that's great. If you got somebody to delegate to, most of us wind up being the person that other people are delegating to. At some point, somebody's got to be the one to empty the dishwasher, for crying out loud.
right,
We want to handle the big things, but somebody's got to handle the little things as well. And a lot of
right.
times that somebody is us. So do we have procedures that will allow us to handle a whole bunch of things? I have my little list for that I handle once a week, little no-brainer kind of stuff, and just handle this back to back to back to back to back to back to back. Like one of them is just once every 2 weeks, go outside, open the crawl space under the house to make sure there's no water underneath there. Okay. That's not exactly like writing the great American novel. And so far, knock on wood, there hadn't been any water under there. But the day that it's a foot deep, I'd sure like to know that then instead of 6 months down the road when the
Right.
foundation is now crumbling. Um,
You
so
still got to check that
y-
crawl space,
uh,
no matter
y-
what. You could be
yeah,
president of the United States, and that crawl space has got to be
we,
checked underneath
we've
that house
all, yeah, we've
by
all got those
somebody
little
on a regular basis.
dumb little things. They aren't glamorous, but they have to be done. So can we put them into some kind of routine so that number one, that we're not waking up in the middle of the night thinking about, oh, I need to check under the crawl space. I hadn't done
Right.
that in a while. Just put it on a list where, once a week you're going and handling a dozen of these things. That once a month you're handling 20 or 30 things that need to
Right.
be handled, checked, looked at, whatever,
Right.
about once a month.
Yeah.
And you're not beating yourself up about being so dumb about forgetting all of it. Because let's face it, none of us can remember all the things that are on our plate. It doesn't work. I was
Doesn't work.
lucky enough to have realized that as a senior in high school, because up to that point, I was going from, I can remember that. Page
Oh,
57 in math. That's my homework tonight. I can remember that. Heck, I'll stick a piece of paper in the math book and I'll just do it in study hall and won't even have to take the math book home. That worked until the senior year in high school. And at that point, there was enough that I realized it wasn't working. And I was kind enough to myself to say, I need a system that's going to now match my workload.
Well, here's what some people say. So the advice to do 3 things per day and no more. So you destroyed that. But what about the person who says you have too many projects or you have too many interests? You need to cut them back. So that's a really popular piece of advice. Cut back your projects, cut back your commitment, get rid of 2 kids. And there's a fallacy in that, which is that if you stop, like for example, if you think somebody tells you got to cut something, so don't exercise as much. So then you say, okay, well, I'll only go walking once a week as opposed to my 5 times a week. So I cut back my exercise, and that way I'll have more time to do my project. Well, the truth is that if you're a creative, committed person, you're going to keep creating at that level 3 using the maturity model. When you're the principal, you'll keep creating more and more and more things. It's not a function of what you call project. It's a function of your capacity to create and assign yourself new tasks. And that will always fill the task list to the brim, because you won't stop being creative and you won't stop being committed. So you might stop exercising. Okay, that's nice.
Right. So we stopped exercising, which gives us more time now for these other things, but then we take on more. So then what else are we going to cut out? Well, I'll just cut out eating, and then I'll have more time to work on my. No.
People do that though.
Yeah.
Honestly, right? People skip meals in order to get through the day. People skip exercise for years in order to get through a decade. People stop go visiting their parents because they don't have the time to get through an adulthood. So these things, what you're implying is that they come back and they eventually bite you in the butt, because there's a feedback loop there somewhere with these things.
Yeah.
You cannot escape because you're the president. You can't stop brushing your teeth. It just doesn't work that way. There is a increase in task volume that you can't just willy-nilly say, well, I'll just scale back. It just doesn't work that way. It's false. It's poor coaching and doesn't work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's some good exercises that do fit for all of us. Somehow, some way, putting it in whatever system you have so that you can see the whole thing. What's the totality of what's on my plate? Is it 500 tasks? Is it so many repeating tasks? What is it? And then what are the things that I don't like doing, that don't need to be done? What are some things where I'm wondering, why do I even keep doing that? Why is that thing on the list? Get rid of some of those things. What are things that we can automate? The great thing about living in the time we do is how many things technology can do for us. Can I bank draft some things instead of sit down writing all those checks? What can I have technology do for me? And if I don't know how to set that up, who does know how to set that up, that I could make a phone call and they could help me do that? And so many of us, we just kick the can down the road and we don't make those kinds of, of decisions.
We don't know how to make those systematic improvements. It's kind of like we want that magical improvement from the new magical app, as opposed to following kind of what you're saying is clean up what you're currently doing in a mindful way.
Yes.
And it will show you what's next, as opposed to this magpie kind of chasing shiny objects. It's a very modern way of trying to solve problems, is to, go to a Google search and, ooh, shiny new object, and then go after that. But I think what you're implying is that your improvement is more a matter of an inside journey than an outside discovery.
It
That
is. Yes.
unlikely to be
Absolutely.
an epiphany from the outside. If there's any epiphany, it'll come from kind of a reflection. Um, there's one thing I wanted to add to what we were saying before we pivot over to purely talking about solutions, which is that what's confounding about this whole thing, and when I coach people, I hear this, is that, like, for example, let's use the example of Peter
Mhm.
from the story. So Peter is back to 345 unread emails in a matter of a few weeks, from inbox zero to hundreds. And he he may very well think that this symptom, which he suffered with for years, the cause of it is the same cause that he had 5 years ago. Because you might think it's like, oh, it's kind of like the common cold.
Mhm.
Here's
Sure.
what you do when you have the common cold. You take vitamin C, you rest, drink lots of liquids, you da 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 da. Da. And when the problem comes back, the human tendency is to tackle the problem the same way. But what he doesn't realize is that he's not the person he was 10 years ago, and he's not using the system he was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
The only thing that's the same is the symptom. And the fact that the symptom is similar is a huge red herring for most of us. Because, like me, I thought that, oh, I'm not managing, so I need to go back, give up time blocking, and go back to what I was doing before. No, instead, these symptoms show up whenever our volume gets to the point where it starts to increase above our capacity. So that could be, you could have 5 tasks and you're forgetting, or you could have 500 tasks and you're forgetting, or you're not executing in the way you want.
Right.
Symptom is the same, but you're not in the same position. So you can't turn back the clock and say, oh, when I had 5 tasks, what I did was I started to write them down on a piece of paper and keep the piece of paper in my breast pocket, because that's what
Mhm.
worked when I was forgetting stuff.
Yeah.
No, you're a whole different person. You're using sophisticated tools. You're using software, and you now need to evaluate the symptom in the light of where you are now, not where you were. And that
Mhm.
that I find it confounds a lot of people. Have you seen that happen, Fran?
All the time. All the time.
And some of us write articles that, unfortunately, that they have titles like "Are you forgetting to do important things each day?" And we have, here are the 3 steps that you need to follow. And we're really talking to Frank Buck when he was 18 in the article.
Yeah.
We're not talking to
Mhm.
a principal of a school or a CEO of a company who has hundreds of tasks. So they pick up the advice, they pick up the article, and they're like, really?
Mhm.
It's not gonna work for me. I'm not 18 years, and if they even realize that much, some of them may say, okay, you're right. I need to simplify things. I need to do 3 things per day. And they may even take us literally. And the principal is now acting like an 18-year-old because they're trying anything that would help. And I
Mhm.
think we confound we confound we confound the diagnosis when we make it sound as if a symptom has always has a particular cause in task management. Because in task management, to follow your maturity model, it just doesn't work that way. What does that
Yep.
sound to you? I'm kind of putting 3 things together.
Absolutely. I'm thinking as you're mentioning that, said that article, and here are the 3 things to do to manage your time and so forth. Uh, and probably number one is going to be write it down. Well, is that applicable to an 18-year-old? Sure. If they're trying to keep it all in their head, there's an opportunity to improve. Um, are we talking to a 30-year-old? Absolutely. If you're trying to keep it all in your head, are you talking to the CEO? Absolutely. But what does that look like in practice? Where is it being written down? Um, when you're the 18-year-old that needs to do page 37 in the math book, as opposed to a CEO who needs to make this phone call. And when he does, needs to have this document in front of him that lives on this drive and 3 different URLs and 3 different emails. And how do we where are we going to put all of that together? Now, if somebody was following me around, they would see exactly how I do it and go, oh, okay. And one of the nice things about having been, for example, a principal or a central office administrator, and there are other people around you who get to see you on a daily basis. I'll never forget my first year as a principal. And so nobody in the school knows me. And I've got my day timer. So that was back before anything was digital. And what they noticed was, that new principal, he's always carrying around that little book. And he's always writing stuff in it. What's he writing? Yeah. And so when I did a little session with the faculty, on those professional development days, when you got to come up with something and it's usually boring. And so we just did just a session on, I showed them the tickler file and my day timer. And they were like, wow. Now that is so simple. And how do you manage, how do you do this kind of thing with the tickler file? And you just go through some use case scenarios and it's like, yeah, now if you just told me here's the tool, that's one thing.
Right.
But when I'm actually understanding exactly the methodology behind how you're using it, how it gets in the system. So to be able to follow people around a little bit, that's one of the things that you're not able to do with the article. You're not able to follow the author around to see exactly how do they do what they do, because what you then see is, oh, okay, that becomes simple. As a band director, we didn't send everybody home with their clarinet and say, hey, just here's your clarinet, go for it. We said, let me demonstrate line 1 for you. Oh, now I see about how much air he's getting a bigger sound. It's much louder. Oh, look at how much air he's taking in. When they're able to sort of walk, not necessarily walk a mile in your shoes, but walk behind you as you're doing these things. I think that's the missing link for so many of us. We all need mentors in so many different ways.
We can't all get them, unfortunately, right? So we need people who know a thing or two to share principles in a way that, I guess it's a substitute for having a live individual with you, because you can learn it but in the abstract without having to be with the person. If you can be with a person who tells you, here's the principle behind what I'm doing, so watch what I'm doing and learn that, understand that there's a principle I'm applying. No, not every mentor does that. They just would tell you, just do what I do. And you say, okay, sir, you salute the flag and you go try do it. And then the circumstance changes slightly, and because you don't know the principle, then you don't know how to apply it. But good mentors, right? Good mentors teach you the principle behind what they're doing. Bad mentors don't even have principles. They're just doing it.
Yeah.
They're saying it's working, so just do it.
Yeah, they teach you the principle and the step 1, 2, 3. I'll use just a sports example. I'm from the state of Alabama, and we really like our football team there at the University of Alabama. And when Nick Saban was hired as the head coach, he was hired away from the Miami Dolphins during a period of time. It was kind of a low period for the University of Alabama football team. And the thing he said to the athletic director was, you've just hired yourself one heck of a recruiter. Now, I think anybody, if they say, now, how can I have a successful college football team? Would say, well, look, go out and recruit really good players. So it's like, okay, let me put that on my list. Recruit really good players. Well, everybody knows that, but why are some people successful and other people are not? Now, what we found is, well, yeah, Nick Saban every year is recruiting, if not the number one recruiting class in the country, it's right up there. But you know what we've seen over the years? The assistant coaches who have worked for him and then gone out to be head coaches on their own,
Okay.
they're also fantastic recruiters. So
Okay.
they've seen not only, oh, you need to be a great recruiter, they've been there to see exactly what does that look like day 1, day 2, day 3 in bite-sized enough things or bite-sized enough steps that they can then reproduce that. And so that
Right.
could be in football, that could be in band,
In
that
task
could be in
management,
leading a school, that could be in leading, in leading a corporation.
right? The great thing about the examples that you described is that each of them actually has a curriculum laid out. Somebody has pre-thought it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually follow someone else's system. You know, the movie Moneyball is a great example. But in task management, we're left to our own devices. We're just making stuff up because the principles of task management, even in a great book like GTD,
Mm-hmm.
they're mixed in with specific practices. They're mixed in with some things that made sense way back when the book was written in 2001, don't make sense today. The book says don't do time blocking. And other parts, David Allen says, okay, block this in your calendar. So it
Right.
has,
Yeah.
so the job I think of us as people who really want to be productive is to listen to podcasts like these and say, and ask ourselves, what are the deeper principles behind what is being said or what's being written on the page that I can apply everywhere? And how can I use that for not just forever, but to do what you said, Frank, which is to do that kind of deep dive into if I'm having those symptoms like Peter is, then I need to
Mm-hmm.
bring these principles to bear to where I am right now. And when I bring them to bear to where I am right now and start to, as you said, clean things up, or in other words, make this as good as it can be, then I earn the right to see where the improvements could come from. Because I'm going to try to apply the same principles, but I'm looking now for some daylight
Yeah.
to say, okay, when this gets as good as it can, then I can maybe forge a path to where I can get to. That's what I'm in combining the different things that we've said. If you can get a mentor to help, all the better. But there in the area that in the world that we're working in task management, you can get somebody who's really productive and they may never explain anything to you because they themselves may not really have principles. They may just have practices. Some of them may have principles that actually aren't principles or they don't actually work out
Mm-hmm.
of a particular context. So then you've got to be thinking, but there's like a second order of thinking that you need to bring to the party in order to make sense of
Yeah.
it. How does that sound?
Yeah.
In a way, I'm trying to summarize because we're actually out of time, but how does that sound
Right.
as a kind of a
Absolutely.
thumbnail?
And even a lot of those people who are doing things successfully, explaining to someone else how they're doing it, a lot of times that process is not there. Whereas you and I, when we're in this field, we're thinking about this kind of stuff all
All
the
the time,
time.
right? We're different, but we're kind of
Abs-
we kind of want everyone to do that because Peter's story is common.
mhm.
It happens to
Sure.
everybody. That you're a teacher. You say I want to be an administrator. You're an administrator. You say I want to be a principal. That's just kind of normal. And as you make that journey, what you said about transitioning from someone who does tasks given to me by others to generating my own tasks from my creativity and my commitment. Everyone in every career makes that journey if they want to, if they're
Sure. Yeah.
ambitious, they make that change. But as they make that change, the task volume goes up and they will have to make multiple jumps And I guess what we close up maybe by saying is that those multiple jumps are not easy to make because it's not like football where it's all laid out. Somebody has figured out the philosophy and figured out the principles. You've got to figure out the principles more or less on your own. And you got to sort of do this deep diving that you talked about without much help, probably, because you probably can't afford most people can't afford a coach or a mentor. They can't sit in a course for 2 days. Ordinary folks, it really does come from this kind of um, deep insight that you get from thinking about it hard on your own. Oh, Frank, with that, whew, how can folks get more of your thinking and your ideas and
Okay,
the Frank Buck
come
material?
over to the website, frankbuck.org. See, I've been blogging since like 2005, so you can just have fun. Don't try to read all the posts that are in there, but you can search for whatever if it's Remember the Milk, search for Remember the Milk, Evernote, whatever you're interested in. I've probably written about it. Get on my email list. You'll see right there on the homepage where you can do that. And every Tuesday, you get an email from me that says, here's the new content that I have created over the last week. Plus, here's some things that I've read over the last week or two that I like that I think you would like. So it's kind of keep. People ask me, Frank, how do you know all this stuff? Well, I have the time to do it, and then I put it there so that other people don't have to go through the same process that I do. That there are those little tidbits for you. So come over to the website, frankbuck.org, get on the email list, and we'll just go from there. It's a journey that I hope where I hope you'll join me.
Great. So I have a request of you, Frank, that you before the episode goes live, that you write a post on the maturity model. Can you
There we
do?
go. Yeah.
Great. And then I'll drop it in the show notes
Okay.
so that folks can go link right back to it because we'll have enough time. Yeah, it'll be a few weeks good
Sure.
before it
Absolutely.
goes live.
Yeah.
So they
I
can
like that
follow up on that
idea.
thinking
Yeah.
because I think there's some there's a clear evolutionary principle in terms of one's career that you've nailed with that maturity model. And I think it deserves some legs. And I think anybody can use it as long as they're ambitious, as long as they want to make progress in their career. They're gonna have to make this transition that you described. So thanks, Frank Buck, for appearing on the Task Management and Time Blocking podcast. Folks, keep
It was a
listening. I'm going to
pleasure.
tell you a little bit about it. It really was. I'm going to keep listening because I'm going to tell you a little bit about our next episode and some other good things coming up in just a few moments.
Thinking of attending the next Task Management and Time Blocking Virtual Summit? Here's a 25% instant saving on your purchase of any ticket or content package. Simply visit timeblockingsummit.info/subscribe-to-podcast. And here's a clip from our next episode.
You've noticed that as you make promises to people to get things done, the risk of not delivering goes up. Sometimes the fact that you made the commitment falls through the cracks as if it were never made. Over time, this reduces your effectiveness and your reputation for getting things done. People start to avoid you, seeking out others who are more reliable. You want to intervene before this gets worse, but just trying harder to remember may not be enough. You want a real solution such that you manually capture new tasks flawlessly, regardless of the circumstances. You want to be someone who never forgets to complete a commitment. Where can you start to create that kind of track record when it comes to your task management? And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message
by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community, mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. Two outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.